consult, and then on occasion I'd be the entrepreneur, so I was involved with a couple of high-tech companies that did well, which is why we have this fund. And I was involved in probably 6 times that many startups that didn't do well, which is why I think I know what I'm doing because of all the mistakes I've made. What my brother of mine and I did was basically pooled our money into something called First Lake Ventures. That about 6 or 7 years ago, as a so-called proprietary fund, I think we put $1 million into it or something like that. And we made the decision. 25 years ago, when I was doing this as an angel, I was looking at publishing, software, and consumer packaged goods companies because none of the other larger venture firms seem to be fiddling around in that area. And so it was easier for me to get early into companies that no one else was talking to. So $50 or $100 or $150,000 could buy an awful lot of ownership in a company. And actually those had the economics that said that it's not unlike a loan. If and when you get traction, you typically do not look back. That was 25 years ago. In this instance, because there's so much private equity money, even after the crash and burn of the last few years, and so much VC money, much of it, I think, chasing stuff that's pretty stale, we thought to add another dimension to the investments we do, which is there has to be a direct, obvious, purely social benefit. I've heard the term, and I think, Arthur, you used it in an email, the triple bottom line or the double bottom line. I don't even think of it that way. I think of it as a single bottom line. The idea is that these businesses will be self-sustaining. That usually translates into profit, but not all the time. Self-sustaining means you don't need extra sources of cash from anything other than the constituents who are arrayed around this idea. In other words, drivers might not necessarily buy the Loom software. There may be people who buy entities who buy it on their behalf, or both. There may be foundation support at a certain point, but by the way, it looks an awful lot like a business. So something tells me the self-sustaining element will come from people paying more for this product than it costs to make it. Pretty straightforward. It's interesting that I leave here to go chair the board of a first-year charter school. If anyone wants training in building a management team, go sit on the board of a first-year charter school. It is a lesson in absolute insanity because typically no one has any kind of operational smarts. By the way, a charter school is a charter school, it's a charter school. There is nothing different one to the other until you get the program. In this case, I've got to move the executive director who holds Dan school into a different job description without losing him. He's not in his sweet spot right now. He'll kill it. I know I'm being videoed right now, but he'll kill it. Those are the conversations I've had as the chair of the board. So the team, actually, the team element, how people work together and how they get along is everything, and it changes on top of that. That's a course in itself, I'm sure. Anyway, that's First Lake Ventures. We've done a handful of deals. The reason I think we're in an interesting position because of this fund is we don't have any limited partners. We don't send out a quarterly report. It's ours. If we didn't want to do anything for the next 5 years, we wouldn't have to do anything for the next 5 years. Mistakes get made when someone has to put money to work. That's not us. So it's not surprising the story about a venture firm that would do the due diligence on a deal that they actually want to do, and they're looking for reasons that it's going to be okay, and they're surprised when someone pops up saying, the guy just got out of jail 3 weeks ago. You don't want to touch this. They still want it. The momentum is moving. They checked off $1.5 million. They were going to be done for the quarter, and it's not the right thing to do. But they can't stop it. They've got to put the money to work. It turns out in this economy, sometimes there are things worth funding, and sometimes there aren't. It doesn't work in a that's a question that usually answers itself. Yes, we want to talk to you. We want to keep talking to you. But we also like to see that there's some other financial wherewithal so that we're not the only investor. So part of our charter is there's got to be some other source of serious money. We can't do $500,000 like that. We can't do $1 million. So we would like to be lined up and with interests synchronized with other groups who can do that, or individuals. ZGen is another micro-incineration application. It's doing pretty well and has raised a ton of money since us. Foundation Source, which is run by a guy named Dan Schlegg, who's a very successful entrepreneur who, like Dan, kind of steered his career toward, he could do anything he wanted, but he chose to do something in a field that actually would pass what I call the "what does your daddy do" test. Well, he actually supplies IT for family foundations so that most of their money is focused on the beneficiaries and not going to support services and staff. That's a pretty good place to be. That fits what we're looking to help. Just like a little, what does your daddy do? Well, he's actually making the world safe and keeping people from texting while they're driving. Not a bad place to be. That works. That's a purpose. There are a few other Honest Tea we did. We did a firm because early on we'd been involved with my pal Gary Hirschberg in Stonyfield. He has a bunch of stuff that every now and then he hops out of Stonyfield, which is a very smart branding, very thoughtful, alternative kind of approaches to marketing, and know how to make money. They are self-sustaining to a fairly well. It's interesting to kind of focus on how Dan and I first got together. Are you all familiar with Myers-Briggs? You should be. You should study it, learn it, find out all you can about it. It's so-called ENFP. It's extrovert, introvert is the modules. It's a very interesting and thoughtful way to get a sense for someone's personal predilections. Are they outgoing or are they more introvert? Do they work on intuition or sensing? Are they thinking mostly or feeling? It's not to say anyone is an absolute in any category, but you get a sense for their strengths and weaknesses. Entrepreneurs typically will be ENFPs. What you want really is an ENFP or an entrepreneur who's gotten dinged up a few times and then knows that they actually don't know everything. Those are much easier people to deal with. When Dan and I first talked, we were supposed to get together for an hour, and we ended up together for about 3.5. I was forever trying to figure out if this person, I'd say this even if he wasn't within 10 feet of me, if this person is so successful, why isn't he a fill in the blank? You know what I'm going to say next. Why isn't he the most arrogant SOB on the face of the earth? How can he contain it so well if he's got any sense of self-importance? There's something about this guy there, and there's no ding marks, there's no warts, there's no bruises. It's just very clear. So the first sense I got, and this was long before it was ever going to be an investment, we weren't talking about that. In fact, he was there to actually see if there was a way that he could come in and do some consulting for us. But it was this sense that, as far as integrity, there's not a hint of guile within him 30 miles of it. And again, I'd say that even if he wasn't sitting in the room. And later on, that gets filed away, and later on, I remember that. guess is that if you work at what you're doing, pound away at it, be a horse for a while, the network will build itself around you. It is amazing to me in the world that if you actually do what you say you're going to do, that turns out to be rare. Boggles the mind. But it's rare. Someone actually does what they say they're going to do. It doesn't happen all that often. So if you can do that, and people see you, people in positions of influence or people who can help you out, they'll find you. Those developments, those behaviors speak for themselves. How am I doing? Blathering on.
That's good.
Is that all right?
Yeah, that's good.
So on the investing side, to see someone who's got a track record. I've got 3 boys and they all play soccer. The youngest one, I've been told by coaches over and over and over again, he knows how to score. Well, they all know how to shoot on the net. This kid knows how to score. If there's a goal to be scored, he knows how to score it. Dan Russ knows how to make money. Not everyone knows how to make money. They can start companies, they can do all kinds of stuff, but making money it's a whole nother talent. It really is. You look for that, and you look for that in a track record, but mostly you look for someone who's going to be credible with all that implies about honesty and integrity. Dan will be faced at different times as the CEO of an early stage and growing company with a decision about, he's got different obligations. He's obligated to his employees, he's obligated to his customers, he's obligated to investors, to his board. Sometimes those interests don't line up. But I know that ultimately he'll either make them line up or he's going to come down on the side of the people who part with the dollar. Because ultimately that's who keeps the operation going. And I think that's it. It is interesting. You can look at business plans and you can read that, you can look at the numbers, you can do all that stuff. There's no such thing as a startup that succeeded on their original business plan. And if they're really doing something important, they didn't revise it 2 or 3 or 4 times, they revised it 30 times, and they did it over time. It's just the business plan is a waste of time for me. I never read it.
I found I have a little different opinion about that. I agree with you that
But you want to see that someone has put a plan
well, the
together.
point is it forces you to think. It just I have to say I don't know of all the companies I've run and started or was hired as a gun, I've never ended up with what I started with.
Right.
You know, and so it's never been
It's
one
broken
of those
field
plans.
running.
And I just even yesterday was talking about the numbers, you know, the projections. The only thing I know about these numbers are they're wrong. You know, which
They're plausible, but they're wrong.
So